And speaking of the major stories of the moment, where to start? I will be wading in, I think, first and quickly to Matt Hancock's continuing travails. And I've got that problem again. I've got to stop laying this on you every single morning. I've got that problem again where I'm really interested in the question of why, even if he was to be blown sky high and busted from here to eternity for lying about care homes and testing, as Dominic Cummings has alleged, as a result of this current period of British politics, which doesn't actually track back to 2016. That was my Brexit blinkers, I think, kicking in a bit early today. Priti Patel still got fired for lying, didn't she, under the last Prime Minister, under Theresa May. That was, you know, back when Boris Johnson was Foreign Secretary, a position from which he resigned. I can't quite remember why. It's something to do with the fact that Theresa May's Brexit deal would be bad news for Northern Ireland or bad news for the Union, wasn't it? Or one forgets. So we'll wade into that shortly. And two questions, I suppose. Is he lying? Has he lied about this? And if so, what's Boris Johnson going to do about it? Boris Johnson's middle name is Liar. Actually, it's not, it's Defeffel, but it might as well be. And so the idea of Boris Johnson handing out morality lessons to Matt Hancock, who, look, for good or for ill, struck me throughout as an absolute mealy-mouthed, dissembling truth twister, but one with a conscience. I fortunately even had to apologise to that magnificent caller John yesterday, telling us about losing his daughter Susie. I had to apologise to him for having stuck up for Matt Hancock. I felt so soiled by the memories of it. But, as a few people pointed out subsequently, a very robust critic of Matt Hancock, his integrity, his honesty, or lack thereof. I just simply thought, looking at him, that he looked as if the body count touched the sides of what passes for his conscience. And I know not everybody likes this observation, but there's an awful lot of people in that cabinet who do not look to me to be in possession of even the slimmest scintilla of what the rest of us might call a conscience, never mind empathy. So Hancock getting hung out to dry. We'll have a little look at the tapes in a moment. Viktor Orban is in town, the Hungarian Prime Minister. Depending on what newspapers you read, he's either a populist, which is, of course, the latest euphemism for rabble-rousing racist, or a rabble-rousing racist. And it will be interesting to see whether or not Boris Johnson picks him up on some of Orban's despicable comments about immigration in general, but Muslims in particular. I've seen a lot of speculation about that already this morning. I haven't seen anybody yet wondering whether or not Viktor Orban might take Boris Johnson to task for his despicable comments on the record about Muslims, and of course his own party's problems with Islamophobia, as reported this. Fascinating times we live in. I'm pretty sure that not wanting to be too close to Hungary in the direction of political travel there was offered up on this programme by a caller as a reason. You'll forgive me for not having 2020 hindsight on this, but I'm pretty sure when we were searching around for reasons to support Brexit that maybe made some sort of sense, I'm sure somebody said to me, we need to get away from the way things are heading in Hungary. So I wonder how that caller, if you're still listening, I wonder how you process the knowledge today that we're cozying up to that regime in the hope of some sort of bilateral friendliness to replace some of what we've lost with Europe's biggest players. And then you've got this 21st of June date, and you've got Joe Biden's inquiry into whether or not the COVID-19 did in fact escape from a virology laboratory in China. I kind of found myself somewhat depressingly wondering if it did, if it's proved that it did, what the hell can we do about it? I mean, China is just this sort of epic behemoth. I don't quite understand, and it's probably got something to do with money and business. That may not be my most astute observation of the day. I'm going to warn you in advance. I don't understand why China is not. It doesn't feel to me in the public place and in the media as the sort of latter-day equivalent of what Russia was during the Cold War. And I don't quite get that. I mean, younger listeners won't know when the Cold War was in full swing. Russia was, just need to watch Rocky films, any Hollywood film. Russia was the baddie in every single context, China doesn't yet seem to have assumed that status, and yet, arguably, its conduct deserves stroke demands it. So 8 minutes after 10 is the time. We'll have a little look at Matt Hancock. Let's go back. Let's go back to April the 15th of 2020. And this is him on Robert Peston's televisual entertainment. Just listen very carefully to the words. You know me, I'll probably hit you over the head with it 2 or 3 times. So if the toaster does pop up in the course of the next 30 seconds, don't panic. I'll give you another chance to hear it. But if you haven't got any waffles in the toaster, then pay attention. Just maybe even perhaps, given that I am off next week, I think I might set the bar even higher than usual today. You may want to actually take notes at this point.
Throughout this crisis, we've been working incredibly hard to protect people in social care. And today we can announce that everybody going from hospital into social care will be tested, will be isolated whilst the result of that test comes through, because that helps to protect people who are in social care, who are, after all, some of the most vulnerable people in the country.
9 minutes after 10, with some confusion over what date that actually is. But let's have a listen to him yesterday at the press conference talking about tests for care homes.
Sending people back to care homes untested did happen during April, and is that your biggest regret in this pandemic?
Well, the thing is, Beth, on that, I mean, I've answered this question many, many times. On that, because we didn't have the testing capacity at the start of the pandemic, it wasn't possible. And what I am very proud of is that we built that testing capacity. But it took time, right? And it took me setting this target, which people didn't think I was going to meet. And because of the team effort, we did meet that target. And then we had the testing available to be able to put the policy in place.
OK, let's try again. So Matt Hancock on the Robert Peston programme on April the 15th, 2020.
Want to now talk about the announcement you've made today about care homes, and you've made a pledge that everybody who needs a test who is vulnerable and in a care home will get a COVID-19 test. When will they be able to get that test?
Immediately. So the capacity
There's enough capacity now for everybody in the social care system who needs a test to get one.
For everybody in the social care system who needs a test to be able to get one. So
okay,
if you're...
that's great.
And once more?
Want to now talk about the announcement you've made today about care homes, and you've made a pledge that everybody who needs a test who is vulnerable and in a care home will get a COVID-19 test. When will they be able to get that test?
Immediately. So the capacity...
There's enough capacity now for everybody in the social care system who needs a test to get one.
For everybody in the social care system who needs a test to be able to get one. So
okay,
if you're...
that's great.
And that's April the 15th, 2020. This is yesterday.
Sending people back to care homes untested did happen during April, and is that your biggest regret in this pandemic?
Well, the thing is, Beth, on that, I mean, I've answered this question many, many times. On that, because we didn't have the testing capacity at the start of the pandemic, it wasn't possible. And what I am very proud of is that we built that testing capacity, but it took time, right? And it took me setting this target, which people didn't think I was going to meet. And because of the team effort, we did meet that target. And then we had the testing available to be able to put the policy in place.
So I honestly don't know. I don't think that's necessarily a hand grenade. It might be. You've heard what I've heard. He could claim, well, April the 15th is very different from April the 17th, James, or April the 8th, Beth. His face when Beth Rigby wasn't muted during that. If you want to hear righteous indignation about how the government is currently treating journalists, then do not miss Eddie Mair at the moment. And the man is absolutely on a mission to point out how ridiculous it is for this government to continue to evade scrutiny and proper questioning. And Beth Rigby snuck under the wire yesterday. Hancock's face when she wasn't muted was something of a picture. So I don't know what the wriggle room looks like here. On the 15th of April 2020, he said everyone who needs a test can get one. Yesterday, he said that in April of 2020, that wasn't the case. The number of patients that were moved from hospital to care homes without being tested is estimated to be in the region of 35,000. Listen, I've done that from memory because I've been reading up on this all morning, and even as I say that number out loud, I wonder whether I've slightly misremembered. But certainly thousands of people were discharged from hospital without being tested. There'll be no way of ever knowing how many of them actually brought COVID-19 back into care homes. Look, I think this is, in normal times, Armageddon, or Armageddon, if you prefer. Here is a chap called David Crabtree, who manages 2 care homes in Bingley, West Yorkshire. He said to the Daily Telegraph last night, without a shadow of a doubt, coronavirus was contracted in hospital, leading to some residents dying. I think the number I was looking for was 36,275 deaths involving coronavirus in care homes since the pandemic began, not the movement of patients from hospitals into care homes. I'll say that number again because I have to. It's my job. 36,275 deaths involving coronavirus in care homes since the pandemic began. And then one remembers that remarkable piece, and I don't know why it happens. We're only human, aren't we? Everything sort of gets muddled in our minds. Our memories sometimes get confused. We get bits mixed up. But that piece about the military campaign, which saw plague-ridden corpses being catapulted over the ramparts of an enemy castle in the hope of infecting everybody inside, and one of the few advantages of having such a rabidly sycophantic right-wing media is that if it appears in there, then it almost assumes a bigger weight than it would if it appeared in more honest organs and more honest outlets. So a doctor, I think, wrote for the Telegraph and drew that parallel. Obviously, patients were still alive, but they were infected with this latter-day plague, and they were transported into care homes in their thousands. So then we go back to April the 12th of last year. After emerging from hospital, one of the first things that Boris Johnson asked, according to Dominic Cummings, was, what on earth has happened with all these people in care homes? Hancock told us in the cabinet room that people were going back to be tested before they went back to care homes. What the hell happened? So you can join me today in a little bit of detective work. I've played you 3 clips, all of which are pertinent, 2 of which seem to be in direct contradiction. Dominic Cummings insists that Matt Hancock lied, that he told the Prime Minister that people were being tested before being sent back to care homes. You can answer that. You can even put dates on it. I don't want you to necessarily rake over too much trauma. But if you can help us, either because it happened in your family or it happened in your care home, where you work or where you live or where you visit, then you can help us with this. I don't think anybody believes that it didn't happen, do they? Nobody is clinging to the notion that people were sent from hospital to care home without being tested. But I guess partly because we're so far down the rabbit hole that I sometimes worry that I've forgotten which way is up and which way is down. But does that mean that Hancock definitely lied? And again, I'm looking at dates and I'm looking at timings and I'm looking at the difference between promises, pledges and policies. I want you to tell me whether you think he's lying or not. But I want you to do it hopefully with a little bit of evidence or a little bit of support for whatever position you adopt. 0345 6060 973. And I'm sorry, I'll read you this because it's nice. James O.B. destroying Matt Hancock on LBC at the moment. He's toast. I think, honestly, that once this particular catalogue of events would have done for a cabinet minister, but this is Boris Johnson's cabinet, in which the 3rd highest office of state is currently held by a woman who was fired from the last cabinet for lying to the last prime minister from the same party as this one. So no, If Hancock gets fired, it will be for, as everything Boris Johnson ever does, it will be because that is what is currently best for Boris Johnson. It will not be done according to any moral code. It will not be done according to any ministerial code. We know what he thinks of those. It will not be done according to any precedent. It will not be done according to any principle. If Matt Hancock gets fired for lying, and we're going to work out together today whether or not he categorically is lying, it won't be because of standards or decency or principles or policy. It will simply be because Boris Johnson wakes up one morning in the next few days and decides that the best thing for Boris Johnson is to throw Matt Hancock under a bus, which brings us back to Dominic Cummings and the claim that the only reason he hasn't been fired already is so that he can be offered up as some sort of sacrificial lamb when the inevitable inquiry eventually occurs. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. Is he lying? Important question. Bring your evidence, bring your receipts, but also, do you agree with my analysis that in the great scheme of things, in Boris Johnson's Britain, it actually doesn't matter anymore, and that is arguably one of the greatest tragedies of all? I may have exaggerated slightly when I said this absolute breakdown in honesty, trust, objectivity and truth may be one of the greatest tragedies of all. This, after all, is the morning upon which we discovered that Nadine Dorries has deleted her Twitter account. So we may be observing a moment's silence later in the programme for the passing of that source of so much joy and entertainment. But serious matters first. Is Matt Hancock banged to rights? Important question. Through the ages, I'd ask you that. Question I only really ask you in Boris Johnson's Brexit Britain. If the Secretary of State for Health is banged to rights and has been lying through his teeth throughout a global pandemic that's killed 130,000 Brits, will that matter? Will that be a sackable offence in this clown car of a cabinet? I honestly don't know. Right now? Well, we'll see. Enough from me. Craig's in Southampton. Craig, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James.
Hello.
So basically, I've worked as an external contractor in the care industry for the last 10 years, looking after certain different pieces of equipment that's covered under legislation. Obviously, the sort of 18 months, the sort of previous 18 months have been horrific. I'm not actually in it anymore. I've left because of the reason.
Yeah.
I worked for some of the main major care home groups, the biggest care home groups. So
you were in and out of them. You were in and out of them all the time.
Up to 15, 16 homes a day, different homes.
Blimey.
I constantly saw home managers battling with ambulance staff that were trying to push hospital residents through. I know managers personally that would phone up, that they would have conversations with hospitals to say, they need to be tested before they're brought in. Envelopes that were sealed and were blank with all the paperwork in. It wasn't until residents were going through the door that the paperwork was then opened. The ambulance had already left the car park, and they had someone potentially with COVID, and all the paperwork was blank. And there was.
Well, you haven't got photos of that. I've got no reason not to. I know. I'm not. I mean, it'd be a bit weird if you did. So I just have to put that out there. I'm not. I've got no reason to distrust you, but neither do you have any evidence to completely prove the point you're making. Do you remember dates, Craig?
This was around April, May last year.
Because if it was, I'm not here to defend Matt Hancock. That ship has sailed. But if we were talking about April Fool's Day, then I can almost see how he might be able to cobble together some sort of defence based upon the facts. But if we were talking about end of April, May, then he's banged to rights. I think he's absolutely pants on fire.
I'd said at the time to many people, and it really what pushed me out of the industry towards the end of last year, that there will be this care home will be a massive crisis that will eventually come out, because we're talking about the lack of PPE is the tip of the iceberg in these places, and these are big companies that are running some of these places. And I'm not in the London area, I'm in the southeast area.
Yeah.
But we're talking like £2,500 a week. It's shocking, and it had really, really put me off. I'd seen people in tears. No,
I took calls. In fact, quite a few people are reminding me that we took calls from people at the time telling us this, not just from families who obviously are in a state of high emotion anyway, but also I'm 99% sure we took calls from care home owners. And if I was taking calls like that, you can bet your bottom dollar Sheila Fogarty was as well, because this is very much an area of always pre-COVID, a massive area of interest for her. So, I mean, I don't know what a smoking gun looks like, Craig, and it may be me being a bit obsessive searching for one, but I mean, I'm not sure Matt Hancock could lie straight in bed as we dig over these facts and clips and memories. April the 2nd, the guidance was still that people who were COVID-19 positive could be discharged to care homes with a recommendation that they be isolated. This is official guidance, I think. April the 2nd, negative tests are not required prior to transfers stroke admissions into the care home. That guidance stayed in place until March the 13th, stated that community transmission was so low that, and I quote, it was very unlikely that anyone receiving care in a care home or the community will become infected. In total, 806 care home residents caught the virus in those outbreaks. That's between Jan 30 and October 12th last year. The figure that I think should haunt all of us is the 36,275 deaths in care homes since the pandemic began. So, Craig, thank you. We're all sort of flying, not blind together today, but I guess underpinning the whole conversation is a sense of a discomfort. Is that the right word? A horror? I don't want to believe that it is quite as clean-cut as it currently appears to be. 0345 606 0973. So I'm very grateful to people getting in touch to suggest that I've been played by Dominic Cummings or that something is going on here that doesn't appear to fit very, very neatly into the conclusion that Matt Hancock's pants are blazing. Elizabeth's in Slough. Elizabeth, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, Jim.
Hello, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'm just calling because we are a care agency that supplies carers to care homes, so
Yes.
we kind of support them when they're staff, and they can't fill gaps with staff. And I remember around end of April,
Yes.
I received a call from the manager. We have supplied that home for quite a long time, so I
Yes.
received a call from the manager, and he said, we have a resident who have been discharged from the hospital. He has not been tested. We suspect he may have COVID. One of your staff will have to look after this resident.
Right.
And I can't believe... staff were already petrified, but they were carrying on. So it was just... So I said to him, do you have PPE? And he said no. And I will never forget, it was around 4. I literally moved heaven. So I called my two friends who ran
Yes.
a domiciliary care agency. I said, I beg you, just give me at least 3 PPE so that our staff can manage tomorrow, because I don't know what they can do. And the manager was very frustrated, trying to say, there is nothing I can do. We don't have PPEs. This is what it is.
And people were coming in.
So,
Patients were coming back into the
Yes.
care home from hospital,
Yes.
either
Yes.
infected or not tested.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or both,
and
of course.
Exactly. He knew that this patient... They were telling the care home, so they said, we haven't tested him, and, this is all what you can do. So it was left to the care manager and the staff to kind of survive, if I say that. And I managed to get at least 3 PPEs for our staff. I drove and I made sure that they had it.
Yes.
I then called the manager. I said, look, staff will have PPE, so at least they can...
But only because you went above and beyond the call of duty. Have we spoken before?
No, but I listen to you 24/7, and you're just too lovely.
Right, yeah, well, that's it. Quite enough. It's got quite.
Cry.
Well, it made me cry as well, actually. But some hearts remained untouched. Elizabeth, I only asked because I think I spoke to somebody doing a very similar job to you back in March or April, telling me a very similar story. So I don't know what a defence of Matt Hancock could possibly look like today, unless it's something to do with the diary and the dates and the calendar.
Exactly. I can't say I don't have evidence, because I do.
Yeah.
I know a resident was released into our care. The manager was literally in tears, and he said, what can I do? I said, look, I'm going to... And I was lucky to manage to get some PPE somewhere.
Yeah, of course.
And all I can say, after that, it was better. But it was about 3-4 months of literally total confusion.
And that sense of being abandoned, of being absolutely abandoned. Elizabeth, you listen 24/7, so you'll know that you've made me late for the news, which is a compliment to how much I was concentrating on what you were saying. But I must move on. Phone lines are open if you want to join in. Let's just do it again, and there will be other examples. And there's the protective ring, and one of the head honchos at the National Care Agency weighed in on Question Time last night. We'll refresh our memories of what she had to say about the protective ring. There is, I don't know if it's confusion, but there is room for clarity with regards to the passage of time between February, March, April, May. However, Dominic Cummings has been pretty unequivocal that he believes Matt Hancock lied through his teeth to the Prime Minister and everybody else in the room where it happens about the testing of hospital patients moving from hospital to care home. And I think, and I don't know, sorry, I'm doing it again, aren't I? I'm expecting you to be my therapist. But I wouldn't have been like this 2 years ago. I'd have been all guns blazing. And that is why the Cummings thing was so weird. Because it was like all the little boys in the crowd who'd been shouting that the Emperor is naked suddenly got vindicated, validated, got endorsed by the bloke that sold him the robes. The non-existent robes. It was so weird. But I appreciate that's a little self-indulgent analysis for you there. But I'm pretty sure that the fact my guns are not blazing is because I've been slightly gaslit as well. Not so much the cynicism. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say that even if he was found with his hands stuck in the cookie jar and biscuit crumbs all down his face, then I could imagine Boris Johnson standing up and saying he has not been anywhere near the cookie jar and he certainly hasn't eaten any cookies. I don't think that is particularly cynical. But the grooming, the gaslighting, we're back to the flesh-coloured body stocking that I bored you rigid with over the Brexit shenanigans. The idea that it's so obviously rotten that I'm beginning to wonder whether there's something I don't fully understand. And that, I think, is again why today I kind of think that we are more or less, I think we're more or less here over the line with regards to culpability and evidence, but I've got that flesh-coloured body stocking feeling like this is the United Kingdom. This is England. Okay, we don't allow this sort of thing to happen in our cabinet government. We don't allow this sort of thing to happen in our parliament. And then you shout at me, what about proroguing? What about lying to the Queen? What about the border in the Irish Sea? What about breaking international law in a very specific and limited way? And I think this is what gaslighting feels like, because I know you're right. I know they've broken every rule, every convention, every tradition, every principle, every promise, every single one of them. They lied to the Queen. They sent Rees-Mogg to mislead the Queen. They stood up and said they were going to break international law in a very specific and limited way. Johnson swore there were not going to be any checks on goods crossing the Irish Sea. It's all lies. All of it. And yet I've still got this weird... Maybe this is how the really bad stuff happens. Because good people just sit there refusing to believe things are quite as bad as they seem to be. Which is why I'm grateful to you, Pinky, for saying whatever you do, James, don't do yourself too much of a disservice for your prior attitude to Matt Hancock. Your desire to see the best in people is a strength, not a weakness. Some days I am sorely tested. Let's just refresh ourselves. Here he is on April the 15th of 2020.
Want to now talk about the announcement you've made today about care homes, and you've made a pledge that everybody who needs a test, who is vulnerable and in a care home, will get a COVID-19 test. When will they be able to get that test?
Immediately. So the capacity
There's enough capacity now for everybody in the social care system who needs a test to get one.
For everybody in the social care system who needs a test to be able to get one. So
okay,
if you're...
That's great.
So... It was in March that Cummings claims that Hancock told Johnson that everybody was getting a test. So even if he was telling the truth on April the 15th, and I don't think he was, then it doesn't mean he was telling the truth in the previous month. Let's go back to yesterday's press conference, the one that had Eddie Mair in such absolutely righteous indignation as this government refused once again to submit itself to proper scrutiny. This is yesterday.
sending people back to care homes untested did happen during April, and is that your biggest regret in this pandemic?
Well, the thing is, Beth, on that, I mean, I've answered this question many, many times. On that, because we didn't have the testing capacity at the start of the pandemic, it wasn't possible. And what I am very proud of is that we built that testing capacity, but it took time, right? And it took me setting this target, which people didn't think I was going to meet. And because of the team effort, we did meet that target. And then we had the testing available to be able to put the policy in place.
And then just for the full set, here is Dominic Cummings giving his testimony to the Joint Select Committees earlier this week.
I mean, there are numerous examples. I mean, in the summer, he said that everyone who needed treatment, who got the treatment that they required. He knew that that was a lie, because he'd been briefed by the chief scientific advisor and the chief medical officer himself about the first peak, and we were told explicitly people did not get the treatment that they deserved. Many people were left to die in horrific circumstances.
So, I mean, again, it's a rock and a hard place, isn't it? Which shape-shifting truth twister do you believe on this occasion? The Hancock one or the Cummings one? Or even perhaps the Johnson one, although he doesn't appear yet to have jumped. And my apologies to Alan Jackson, who's dealing with a noisy washing machine here, and asks whether I can speak up a bit. I shall do my best, Alan. Let's go to Ariana in Welwyn Garden City. Ariana, what do you think?
Hi.
Hello.
So my mum went into a care home for the first time on the 8th of April. My dad died of COVID on the 3rd of April, and he was her carer. She's got Alzheimer's. And my husband's got cancer, so I was unable to take her into my house because obviously he's extremely clinically vulnerable.
Yes,
and we weren't sure what her situation was. And I was talking to social services first time ever, and a GP, and we were desperately trying to get a test for my mother prior to going to a care home, and there were none available. Now, that's slightly off-piste.
Because she wasn't coming out of hospital, but she was coming out of a house in which someone had just died from the infection.
Yeah, basically. And there were no tests. There were no tests to be had. We actually isolated her for a week, and the care home took her. She didn't infect anyone and she didn't have COVID, it turned out, but that was through sheer luck.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and your caution as well. I mean, not having it was luck, but not if she, if she had it, it sounds like you'd done a belt and braces job to keep it confined to her quarters as well. Yeah,
I mean, the manager of the care home was lovely, and we sort of came up with this plan that we would isolate her for a reasonable period because she didn't want to put her residents at risk. She also explicitly told me that she was being asked to take people from hospital constantly who did not had not had tests, and she said, "I'm just not taking them." And I said, "Oh God, are you allowed to do that?" And she said, "No, I'm not allowed to do that. But every resident has a list of potential residents. Comes with a list of specific needs." And she said, "So, for example, if they need to have, I don't know, bed baths or something," I can't remember which example she gave me. She said, "I just say, sorry, we don't have the staff to do that." So I never, weirdly, have the staff at the moment to give the resident the care they might need. So I'm not taking people out of hospitals. And she kept COVID out of that care home. She did an amazing job, and we're all really grateful. But she had to do it.
And she did it off her own back, entirely off her own back, and perhaps in direct contravention of some of the usual rules and regulations. And so this was in the second week of April that you had these conversations, and she was fighting these battles. So
absolutely. So there weren't tests available, absolutely, as a fact. There might have been later in the year, but there weren't then. And in fact, I was so alarmed, and I like doing bits of research. So I found the, I think it's NHS England document that was published on the 2nd of April that explicitly said people do not need to have a negative test when they're released from hospital. Because obviously I was worried two ways. I didn't want my mum to infect people, but equally I also didn't want her to go into a care home because my dad, who was her carer, died and get COVID and die, because that would have been ironic, wouldn't it, in a very bad way. So there explicitly were no tests available, and even the GPs were saying, we can't get a test there are none. We can't get a test to help you.
You have done your research. I'm very grateful to you, because that is exactly right from April the 2nd. Negative tests are not required prior to transfer stroke admissions into the care home. This is, first of all, how's your mum? I hope she's...
She's fine, actually.
She's all right.
She's very well, yeah.
And your husband?
And being well looked after. Thankfully, he's also well.
Oh, I hate asking these questions on the radio, Arianna, but I often feel it would be really weird of me and insensitive of me not to. But of course, until I ask, I don't know what the answers are going to be. So I'm glad that what must have been a horrible, horrible first few months of last year have been a bit better for you this year.
Yeah. It was hideous. And there were also the other issues that obviously people with cancer weren't able to have treatment for a while, for 3 months.
Some experience of that myself.
Blah, blah, blah.
But we're not blah, blah, blah. We're not fans of stiff upper lips on this programme. We're more Team Prince Harry than Team Prince William. But that's a conversation for a different day. Do you recognise what I'm describing as gaslighting, given how close to the action you have been? The idea that I'm almost losing trust in my own memory and judgment.
I know, he's completely gaslighting us. Yeah. I mean, it was down in black and white. They weren't testing people. The NHS weren't required to. And I completely recognise that individual care home managers went above and beyond, sometimes against their management companies.
Yes, well, exactly. We were hearing that at the time. And we were speaking to owners who were going much, much further than less conscientious managers and owners were going, because they just knew, they sensed it in the wind, and of course also they subscribed to the old better safe than sorry school of thought. If we end up to have taken too many precautions, what's the worst thing that could happen?
I know, and also, I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail, but my goddaughter, who has now left, was a critical care nurse at a London hospital, and throughout the pandemic, she's just left. And people did not get the care they needed, so that's another lie, and certainly not in the second wave, where they were making really difficult decisions. They ran out of ventilators. The second wave was obviously much worse than the first, and they were having to use transport ventilators that they would send patients out in an ambulance with that last for a couple of hours. And then, as they swapped, they would have to make decisions as to which patient would get the temporary ventilator. I've
heard a similar story, and we also heard from Cummings, who, of course, is not the gospel truth, far from it. He's done more to blah, 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 as Arianna would say, but he claimed that some of those opportunities to buy better ventilators were actually missed because of cost concerns. Arianna, thank you. I mean, again, I don't know if it's too self-indulgent of me to ask the question about the gaslighting, but it does feel as if we're all in the crowd, the emperor's stark naked, and we're all just still in this weird place as a population. This must be like what the entry level is to being in North Korea, where you're thinking, I don't know that I do trust the evidence of my eyes and ears on this one, because the people in charge keep telling me the opposite of what I can see, what I can smell, what I can hear, which is perhaps why programmes like this assume an air of importance at times like this, but only an air. Arianna, thank you. Speaking of time, it is very relevant here. Cummings claims that Johnson asked what on earth has happened with all these people in care homes after getting out of hospital himself. You remember he was confined for 7 nights with coronavirus. That was on April the 12th that he got out. Cummings says the first thing he did was ask what's happened with all these people in care homes. The claim is that he had been told in March that everybody in hospital heading to a care home was being tested. But that didn't actually become an official requirement. That didn't become part of the official policy until April the 15th of last year, which would seem to support the idea that Johnson discovered that it wasn't already happening. I'm not defending Boris Johnson. In fact, if you subscribe to certain corners of Twitter, you'll know I am personally responsible for Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister. That was a fascinating little emergence yesterday. So I'm not defending Boris Johnson, but this fits. Remember, Cummings was throwing almost as much manure at his former boss as he was at the current Secretary of State for Health, so I don't think this can get chalked up as personal, because he was happy to attack them both, but Johnson emerges from this better than Hancock does for the very simple reason that the dates fit. So he gets out of hospital, he says, what the hell's going on in the care homes? Brackets, I thought Hancock told... I mean, Cummings provides these brackets. Hancock had told us everyone was being tested, close brackets. He finds out after getting out of hospital himself, as an added pertinence, that it wasn't happening. Therefore, 2 days later, on April the 15th, it was brought in. In response, it would seem, to the discovery that it was not already happening. But the suspected death toll in care homes was likely to have reached 7,500 already, according to data collected by Care England. And that figure dwarfs the numbers that were being issued by the Office of National Statistics, which was down around 217. I mean, unbelievable. So it seems to me that Matt Hancock is absolutely banged to rights. It seems to me that Matt Hancock's underpants are currently doing a very, very good impression of Dante's Inferno. And that's why I hate the second bit of the question, which I'm not ready to move on to yet. Court has not yet been adjourned. When court is adjourned, we'll ask whether the verdict even matters. Because I can't help it. That's the little bit I've got kicking in next in the back of my brain. Yep, looks like he's banged to rights. Will it matter this time? And imagine if he got the independent advisor on the ministerial code to look into it, and the independent advisor on the ministerial code came back with a report that said, yeah, here you go, Boris Johnson. Matt Hancock, banged to rights, mate, underpants are on fire, I've never seen anything like it. The man couldn't lie straight in bed, and Boris Johnson goes, just file it, will you, with the one about Priti Patel bullying. Your predecessor resigned after I ignored that one. I hope you're not going to do anything rash with the new... and again, we're back to gaslighting. 10:55 is the time. Josh is in Notting Hill. Josh, what can you tell us?
Hi there. Look, I worked for 128 days straight in the NHS as a contractor service provider. And I have to tell you, his get out of jail card that he's going to play is that all the patients leaving were tested, and that's correct. They all were tested. But the problem was...
So what date are you talking about?
I'm talking about in... March and April.
But we know that they weren't. I mean, I don't want to argue with you because we've already spoken to people who were running care homes saying our patients were arriving without being tested.
Okay, so can I tell you what was happening? They were being tested.
You're telling them that they're wrong.
No, I'm not. You're putting words into my mouth. Let me finish. I was there. I was in the front line. They were being tested. But, James, we were giving patients and paramedics sheets.
It took 3 days to get the results. But the people running the care homes...
That was outrageous.
Yes.
It was outrageous because my job was to phone matrons, care home workers, ward managers in community hospitals and say to them, that patient is actually now positive, who you have on a negative ward.
That's not a counter, Josh. I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm just hoping to provide a little bit of clarity, because I've spoken to matrons, I've spoken to care home workers, I've spoken to daughters, I've spoken to spouses, I've spoken to partners, I've spoken to carers. The people you're talking about were tested. The results came back 3 days late, by which point they had probably infected half a dozen people in the home. Lots and lots and lots of other people were not being tested.
No, I understand that, but
this isn't to get out of jail card, because all you have to do is find a few thousand people who were not tested, and that would be easier than...
I understand that.
That's easier than finding eggs on Easter Sunday.
No, I understand that, James, but the fact was, even those that were tested should not have been released, and that's what was taking place.
You can't release them until you've got the result.
No, but we were.
I know.
We were, because we were told from above, they have to leave. This is a pandemic hospital. They are negative. And we're saying, well, we haven't got the results. They have to go back into the community. They have to go back to social care. They have to go to the community hospitals where they can be rehabilitated. We were effectively infected. I even gave my boss an article from the New York Times that showed that in Mexico City, they realized that most of the infections and most of the deaths inside hospitals was because of that system.
I understand why you are so passionate about this, and I respect your passion, and I thank you for it, but I do have to provide some facts in response to your feelings. March the 19th, 2020, government guidance is changed so that hospitals no longer needed to avoid sending patients to care homes with no testing necessary. That decision, which was obviously heavily criticised, was later reversed by the government. Exactly 1 week later, on March the 26th, the National Care Forum, Josh, wrote to Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson warning that care homes were being pressured into taking hospital discharge patients who had not been tested for the virus. So we can add to that, even some of the ones that were being transported before the results had come in, and the results would often turn out to be positive, but it's not a counter to the reality of care homes being pressured and succumbing to that pressure, because we spoke to them at the time, into taking hospital discharge patients who had not been tested for the virus. I mean, it is absolutely incredible. It's so horrible, this, that part of me wonders whether turning it into a traditional, should he be sacked, should he be fired, is almost disrespectful to all the people that have died.
I said sack him. I said sack him like almost every week, sometimes almost every day. He was told, though, that you should not sack him. You should keep him there because he's the person you fire when the inquiry comes along. I thought, my counter-argument to that was, if you leave him there, we're going to have another set of disasters in the autumn. And that's the critical thing. Forget the inquiry. The inquiry, God knows when that'll bloody happen. We've got to get rid of this guy now, because every single week things are going disastrously wrong.
And, of course, at the time, an awful lot of your humble correspondents and your friends in the right-wing media were telling you that things were not going horribly wrong at all. In fact, I think some of them are still telling you that Boris has done a bang-up job. He's done his best. I suppose I should point out, for reasons of balance, that however worried you are about having these people in charge, you should draw enormous confidence and reassurance from the fact that Nadine Dorries is a Minister for Health. And so it continues. I think, understandably, I don't know, I use these words a lot, maybe a bit too much, gaslighting and groomed. But is there a defence of Hancock available? Is there a way that you can listen to what you've listened to today and explain how Matt Hancock didn't lie and that Dominic Cummings is wrong, is lying? I'm not being glib or facetious. I am perhaps being a little bit over-optimistic or idealistic. But if you are that person, then I just want to hear it. But remember, as with all of these issues, it has to be evidence-based. It's not just licking your finger, sticking it in the air and ringing me up to tell me which way you think the wind is blowing, when the weather vane on top of the church over the road is pointing in exactly the opposite direction. And it's the dates that seem to have done for Hancock, which leads, perhaps, inevitably, perhaps not, to the question of whether any of it even matters anymore. What will you be using as a fig leaf today? If you're a cultist, is it? Oh yeah. Oh, you trust Dominic Cummings now, do you? Is that no? Not at all. I trust the evidence, like I did when he was lying to you about Brexit, and I examined the evidence and realised he was lying about a lot of stuff. It's nothing to do with the colour of his scarf or the team that he plays for. I'm looking at the evidence now. I'm looking at dates. I'm looking at quotes. I'm playing you clips. I'm bringing receipts, and I'm asking, has he done it? Has he lied? And it's very, 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 very hard for me to see how anyone could now argue that he didn't. But if you want to, I'd love to hear it. But fig leaves? We can't trust Cummings, or Boris has done a great job. What about the vaccines? So I don't know if you noticed this. It started happening about 3 years ago. If I ask you a question about X, then your response, and social media has primed this, you must shout about Y. If I ask you a question about X that you don't like the answer to, just scream at me about Y or Z or even Q. See what I did there? That's the American equivalent. So I ask you a question about X. Do you think Matt Hancock is lying? Why don't you just shout at me about, I don't know, Diane Abbott? Or statues? Do you think Matt Hancock, do you think the Secretary of State for Health has been lying since the beginning of this outbreak? To you? Yeah, well, the other lot want to pay reparations to people whose families were slaves. Yeah. Do you think the Secretary of State for Health has been lying to you while British people have been dying on an unprecedented level for peacetime? Why aren't you talking about diversity on Britain's Got Talent, O'Brien, you white-hating traitor? Do you think the Secretary of State for Health has been lying to you while your family members were ill and possibly perishing? I'll tell you what I'm very cross about, that National Trust publishing history of houses when I just want to go for some scones and some lapsang souchong. But that is how it works. And it used to be, I mean, I talk about it being something that's been fomented on social media, but it's government policy now. It's not just sort of weirdos with bulldog avatars on Twitter or your Auntie Doris's Facebook page where you get this. You get it at a ministerial level. It's probably part of the reason why Nadine Dorries has deleted her Twitter account, although quite a lot of you have pointed out to me it's more than likely she might have done that entirely by accident. It is. I'd like to know whether or not the Secretary of State for Health was lying. When are they going to open the pubs? What? I want to know whether the Secretary of State for Health was lying while people like John, who we spoke to yesterday, were burying their beloved daughter. Oh, I don't want to talk about that. Let's talk about why didn't you support Jeremy Corbyn? What? What do you reckon? Was he lying? Can anyone offer up a plausible defence? 11:07 is the time. Rob's in Bromyard. Rob, what do you think?
Well, I think the most generous interpretation that you could put on this, and I am not defending Matt Hancock, is that he has
You can if you want.
No, I really don't want to. I really don't want to.
All right.
But the evidence is their own evidence on their website. I'm looking at the guidance to care homes.
Yes, so am I.
Updated. And it's clear from here that on the 15th, they were committed to testing all residents, but carry on reading down the sentence to include all symptomatic residents.
Right.
Next sentence, we have since gone further with the government announcing on the 28th of April that testing will be expanded in care homes to include both symptomatic and asymptomatic care home staff and residents.
But then, of course,
we were testing people in April.
Now, I understand the point you're making, and I understand why you describe it essentially as a flimsy defence, because the other big hole in it, of course, is that saying that you can do it, saying that you should do it, saying that you would do it, is not the same as doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the evidence, not the anecdotal evidence. That is the evidence we've had from the care homes.
Well, I think it's why we need the inquiry now, not in a year's time, when all of this stuff gets deleted off of the government website. And
forgotten. You know me, I always like to walk the tightrope between cynicism and honest error or honest mistake. It could be forgotten. People are going to forget stuff. So Cummings says that in that room, when he said they were testing everybody in March, and of course if he said that, then all of your research on the official guidance for April it becomes largely irrelevant, because no one is able to back up the claim that they were doing it in March. All that Hancock can do is deny that he ever said it. Cummings claims that Johnson, the Cabinet Secretary, a bunch of Number 10 staff, some Department of Health staff, other people on Zoom, possibly Simon Stevens, and the reason I mention that is because of the word possibly. When you just said that, stuff will disappear, stuff will get shredded, stuff will go south, and then I said some stuff will just be forgotten, and I don't have a problem with Dominic Cummings not being 100% sure. I'm going to do my Hamilton quote again, Rob. Who was in the room where it happened?
Well, I'm no fan of Dominic Cummings. I'm a Remainer.
And you can't be anymore. You can't be anymore. You can't remain in something that you've already left, Robert. Do keep up.
Well, that's if I can't prove I've got Spanish heritage somewhere down the line and get out before it all goes completely south.
True. But on this occasion, it seems that Cummings is the one who is telling the truth. And if he isn't, it should be very, very, very easy to say so. 03 4560 973 is the number you need. And we said he was lying all along. You know, I'm going to do this sort of slight bit of reputation management, in that just because I thought he had a conscience about all the people who died doesn't mean that I wasn't accusing him of talking through his hole when he claimed that a protective ring had been thrown around cows. We haven't even got onto that yet. I mean, that is not even vaguely defensible. What are you going to bring to that party? We've put a protective ring around care homes. Oh, well done, Matt. Anyway, it's a year later now. How many people died? Just shy of 40,000, James. What, in the care homes? After you'd put the protective ring around them? Yeah. Okay. No wonder you want to talk about flags and flipping statues. Alison's in Crawley. Alison, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Hello. I'd just like to say this man came out of the sort of starting blocks lying. On the 5th of March 2020, he was on BBC's Question Time programme, and when he was sort of under pressure as to how it was all going to manage with lockdown and people who couldn't get out and didn't have anyone to shop for them and so on and so forth, he claimed that they had been talking to all the major supermarkets. By the next morning, the newspapers were full of reports that none of the supermarkets had actually heard.
First we've heard of it. Again, I'm not to defend him. He could have been told that by a civil servant. It could have been points of contact hadn't filtered through. It wouldn't necessarily have been a barefaced lie.
It just feels like a man who was standing there going, "Oh, crikey," and just came out with a load of, nonsense. And I'm sorry, but he didn't even have to say it. He could have said, we are going to talk to all the supermarkets and see what we can set up, whatever. But he just lied. And, it's just gone on and on from there. And bizarrely, because I looked it up halfway through when he came with the protective ring around care homes thing, because it just annoyed me so much, because I thought at the time, my goodness, this is the Secretary of State for Health, who we as a nation need now, facing this pandemic, to have absolute trust in, and he has just gone on national television and told a lie. That is not
all made a mistake. I know, don't shoot me. No, I know. I just have to say that because I'm such a nice person. You know how it works, Alice.
I think sometimes too nice.
I couldn't agree more. I might put you in touch with my wife. My kindness is a curse. Honestly, a curse.
But this is how it started. And then when I tried to look up and go back, because I'm thinking, I know I heard him say that.
Yeah.
And I went to the BBC archive, and they had edited out him saying that.
Really? Oh, hang on.
Yes.
Don't go all Tim Four Hat on me, Alison.
Well, I'm telling you, and now
Okay.
it's not available, but that's just a date thing. That's
Well, I've got
not-
so you mean it's expired on the player? I remember that story, and if the BBC footage isn't there, then the newspaper reports of it the next day will be. But you mentioned the BBC archives, and it was. I don't really watch Question Time. Do you know why? It's on too late. It's pathetic, isn't it? That lad rang in yesterday from Detroit. Vague memories of my days as a raver when I'd keep a clean shirt in my drawer in the newspaper office because there were actually mornings when I'd turn up for work not having been to bed the night before. And now, Question Time, that's a bit rich for my blood. But it was on last night, and the executive chairman of the National Care Association, Nadra Ahmed, was a guest, and she had this to say.
He threw a protective shield around care homes.
Absolutely not. It's absolute rubbish. There was no shield around. I think that was an utterance that came about in a form of embarrassment, perhaps, because nothing had been done for social care.
And, there you have it. She could be lying, of course, or Matt Hancock was. You choose. And I know I give you quite a hard time if you're still clinging to the carcass of the idea that you weren't sold the mother of all pups by J-Dog and Boris and Cummings and David Davis and Andrea Leadsom and all the rest of them. But if you're still clinging to it, how do you feel now? What's that? Chief Executive of the National Care Association? I wouldn't want to listen to her. Not when Matt Hancock's flogging snake oil on the other side of the road. Let's all go and stock up on Matty H's heady brew. 11:15 is the time. After this break, some big and breaking news with regard to a story I'm very happy to say we've covered properly, and very unhappy to say a lot of the British media hasn't. I speak of the Daniel Morgan independent panel and some significant movement on that front that I'll share with you after this. I have two phone lines free if you're keen to contribute to this conversation, although I do want to keep one of them spare for just the kind of sweeping up, if you like, the possibility that there is an interpretation of the events that we are discussing and exploring together that doesn't cast Matt Hancock's underpants as being on fire. That it's a genuine. I mean, it sounds facetious because at the moment I can't quite see how that would look or sound, but I do want to keep the possibility afloat, alive. The notion that Cummings was wrong, and don't forget, this is a crucial point in the context of question 2, which is, does it even matter anymore? And thank you for a couple of people who've expressed concern about the desolate nature of that observation. I'm a journalist. I get a bit emotionally involved sometimes. Yesterday was a day when I couldn't help it, but no more than anybody else when I'm not on the radio. So don't worry about me. the problem, of course, is that Dominic Cummings created an environment in which lying doesn't matter. He, in many ways, created a prime minister for whom lying was not a problem. Dominic Cummings masterminded an election campaign in which Boris Johnson's fundamental, inherent, serial dishonesty was, and this is the phrase I've heard them use, priced in, end quotes, priced in with the electorate. Yeah, the voters know that he's a massive liar, but they still love him. What do you think happens, Dominic, if you put a massive liar in charge? You expect me to have a fit of the vapours because one of the people he appointed to a job also is a massive liar? You created Boris Johnson. You delivered Brexit entirely on lies. So, far from sympathetic to people on the right who are struggling even to remember which way to sit straight at the moment, so completely corrupted has their position been by events and reality. But Cummings created the environment in which dishonesty was rewarded, in which dishonesty was expected, in which dishonesty was de rigueur. He created it. So he's telling the truth now, the evidence would suggest, but the absence of consequences for Hancock, if it is proved beyond any reasonable doubt that he's been lying through his teeth since day one, the absence of consequences for lying in government is Dominic Cummings' fault. That's why this is such a weird little pageant or chapter in the national story. Did Matt Hancock lie? Yeah. Will he be punished for it? Well, that's tricky, because you see, Boris Johnson's in charge, and he's an even bigger liar than Matt Hancock. But it doesn't matter, because we romped home in Hartlepool, and if we keep telling people loudly enough that he's doing a brilliant job, vaccines, Brexit, Brexit, vaccines, then maybe they'll just forget and forgive all of the lies. Which, and this is where I get a bit too Kremlinistic, perhaps, that's what makes me wonder whether even if Johnson wanted to sack him, he could sack him, because it would at least float the balloon of possibility that lying is bad. And we know that in Boris Johnson's government, lying is how you get ahead. If you want to be if you want to be Home Secretary in Boris Johnson's cabinet, you lie to Theresa May when you're in her cabinet. So I don't know. John's in Portsmouth. John, what would you like to say?
So I agree with you about the lying, and that's really, really bad. But what I was just trying to look at, what was the motivation for what happened to move people out of the hospitals?
Yeah.
So when we had chaos, right, we had uncertainty. A lot of people running around didn't know what to do. And the decision was to clear out the hospitals. Why? Because they were clearing them for this onslaught of other sick people that were trying to, they would need to treat. So, I think it was a mistake with hindsight. I think, the second wave was managed a bit differently. But in that case, that's why it was done. The motivation wasn't necessarily bad, and they were clearing out the hospital.
But he lied to, the accusation is that he lied to Boris Johnson. Not just to you and me. That might work as a vague defence. Vague, and I know it's vague, but the accusation that he lied to the Prime Minister about it happening when it wasn't happening it's devoid of motivation, isn't it?
Yeah, it is terrible, but we come to expect of that. The bigger problem is just the lack of honour and lying generally with politicians.
But I have to pause you there, because it's not true. They're not all massive liars. They didn't all get fired from the Times for lying to their own godfather. They're lying about their own godfather. They didn't all get fired from Theresa May's cabinet for lying about secret meetings with a foreign government. They haven't lied about. They don't all lie about. Look, Diane Abbott once drank a mojito on a train, right? And she got some sums very badly and humiliatingly wrong in this radio studio many years ago. But the idea that they're all of a piece, that's really dangerous, John.
Well, okay, maybe not. I kind of, in that context...
That's Trumpish.
I was referring in that context to the cabinet and the ministers. Yeah, I agree that
the current climate. Robert Jenrick. Robert Jenrick shouldn't be in post. Priti Patel shouldn't be in post. Matt Hancock shouldn't be in post.
I completely agree with you along those.
But if you were sitting in judgment, in a kind of sitting on a cloud watching the story unfold, then you could just about make a case for messing that up, because you sacrificed the care homes upon the altar of the hospitals, and we needed to get hospital capacity as high as it possibly could be because we were terrified of seeing scenes like the ones we saw in Italy. As you know, that's an alternative universe. But in that alternative universe, it would be an explanation, if not an excuse. 25 minutes after 11 is the time. Neil is in Leeds. Neil, what would you like to say?
Yeah, how you doing, James?
Well, not great, to be honest with you. This is my home. We live here, Neil, you and me, and then we've got these clowns in charge. But hey-ho, on we go.
I just wanted to remind everybody that at the end of January in Parliament, he told Parliament, Matt Hancock told Parliament that he had that the NHS had developed a test and trace capability, and he had all the testing required to meet any future cases that may arise. And that's on YouTube. You can hear him saying it, and it's actually probably documented in Parliament.
January?
At the end of January.
2020?
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I don't...
If they are ready for a...
This makes my teeth itch a bit when people say you can look it up on YouTube. But I could double check.
You can hear him say on it today.
All right. I just find the dates... I find the dates a bit January 2020 a bit tricky. But hey-ho.
He said that at the end of January 2020, the NHS has developed a test and trace capability for coronavirus, and we've got all the testing required for any cases that may arise.
And here we are, 18 months later.
So it's for everyone to hear.
That's another point we've missed.
Like to remind, but why didn't he have the testing available? Because there was a national risk assessment done in June 2019 that said we're not prepared for a pandemic. He was the minister in charge at that time. Why didn't he have the testing available?
Well, I mean, these are questions for the ages. I mean, they're questions that you would hope an inquiry would address and indeed answer. Speaking of inquiries, as promised, some breaking news for you regarding that Daniel Morgan independent panel. Daniel, you'll remember, well, you'll know if you've been listening to this programme in the last couple of weeks, a private investigator who was murdered in circumstances believed to be linked to the fact that he was about to blow the lid off huge stories involving police corruption and media complicity. Big questions for Rupert Murdoch's organisation that still need to be answered. And this statement from that independent panel has been released in the last half an hour. Subject to final confirmation by the Home Secretary, the Right Honourable Priti Patel MP, the report of the Daniel Morgan independent panel will be published in Parliament on Tuesday the 15th of June. The Home Secretary and the Daniel Morgan Independent Panel have had a series of discussions to reach this target date. An agreement has been reached that a small team from the Home Office will be permitted to read the report in advance of publication under strict viewing conditions at the premises of the panel. As was always envisaged, the Home Secretary will be provided with a copy of the report to read before publication. There are no redactions in the panel's report, which is complete. In the unlikely event that any redaction is applied by the Home Secretary, this will be clearly indicated in a footnote. The panel now sees a clear way forward to the publication of its report. So I don't know quite what the right word is really, but it is good news, of course, in the context of thinking that it might not happen or wondering precisely why it wasn't happening. That is good news for Daniel's family, including, of course, his brother Alistair, who we spoke to last week. One more call on this, I think. I don't know that we're going to get any form of defence for Matt Hancock, and I don't know quite what we do with that. That is where it gets a little bit grim, isn't it? Yeah, no, he lied anyway. Everyone move along. I wonder what we'll be talking about tomorrow. Probably, I don't know, e-scooters and statues or something like that. It's Saturday tomorrow. Mon-Fri will no doubt be returning to the big issues. So last word, Alex, keep it snappy in Guildford.
I was wondering if we could just play the Matt Hancock clip again quickly. Have we got time?
No.
Okay, well, he says in there, when he was questioned by Beth, that I achieved the target of the testing, and then he quickly corrects himself and saying, the team behind it. Do you remember Dominic said when he was giving his evidence that it was Matt who had set the ridiculous target of testing?
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, good spot.
Achieve it. I just wonder if testing all the people who are coming from the hospital into nursing homes was just going to be too slow and wouldn't have achieved the target, and that was why they sent them to the scrap heap effectively.
Ramted, I don't quite understand the second half of your point, but the first half, that idea that Cummings casts Hancock in the role of having this shiny bauble, as in his target, and he interfered with other issues and arguably damaged other areas of governance by obsessing about the testing. That I think was the point at which Cummings revealed he'd been calling for Hancock to be fired almost every day. Talk about a rock and a hard place. But don't focus on the personalities. Have a look at the evidence. Okay? Examine the evidence, not the star sign or the football club of the protagonists. It sometimes feels like I give you premium content on Twitter because I find myself about to share something with you on the radio and then I realise actually I tweeted it 2 or 3 hours ago, so it's not exactly what you call box fresh. Viktor Orban's visit to Boris Johnson today is yet more evidence of our national decline. Of course, Orban, one of the most toxic and sinister leaders that Europe has seen in the post-war period. But as people pontificate over whether or not Boris Johnson will bring up some of the disgusting things that Orban has said about Muslims, you could, if you were Hungarian, be perfectly entitled to ask whether or not Viktor Orban is going to bring up any of the disgusting things that Boris Johnson has said about Muslims. And anti-Semitism very, very, very front and centre in some elements of that issue as well. But I've got some gossip. Do you want some gossip? Quite good gossip, actually. I was at the Hungarian embassy. Yeah, that's how it starts. I was at the Hungarian embassy. Yeah, in the actual ambassador's office. I know what you're thinking. Were there any Ferrero Rocher, Keith? Why did you have to go there, mate? It's such. I've heard that the Foreign Office has banned Ferrero Rochers from being served, not that they were ever a particular feature of the ambassador's receptions, but because it is such a cliche now and so boring. But anyway, I was there. I was particularly sweaty, actually, if you're interested, because I went to Eaton Place instead of Eaton Square, or I went to Eaton Square instead of Eaton... Well, wherever it is, I didn't go there. I went somewhere else, and then the phone rings, and the Hungarian foreign minister is waiting to talk to me. And they're getting quite cross. And I didn't really care enough. But I did run. So I was there. I was a little bit sweaty. Guess who? This is going back to 20... I was still working for the BBC, so it must be 2017. I'll check, actually. Bear with me on that one. Guess who featured in a silver photograph frame upon the desk of the Hungarian ambassador back in, I'm going to find it for you, because you know me, it's all about the evidence, back in July of 2017. So, little Jimmy O.B. is in the ambassador's office at the Hungarian embassy in Eaton Square / Place. And guess who is in a framed silver photograph upon the desk of said ambassador? I'll give you another clue. The foreign minister described the person in the photograph on the desk of the Hungarian ambassador as my very good friend. Go on, have a guess. All right, I'll give you another clue. The fella in the photo was Foreign Secretary at the time, although he subsequently resigned because Theresa May's Brexit deal was really, really going to muff things up in the Irish Sea. Yeah, him. I thought that was quite good gossip. I don't get to do stuff like that anymore. I had to step down from presenting duties on the BBC in order to continue to tell you the truth about things like Donald Trump, Brexit, and indeed Boris Johnson on this programme. But I know it's a bit of choice morsel, that, isn't it, of trivia / gossip? So they were already big mates. This idea that we must reach out and make friends with arguably the most toxic post-war regime in Europe. They've been breaking bread. They've been reaching out to each other for years. A brilliant journalist called Anne Applebaum, who's written at length about overtures between Orban's party and senior Conservatives, not just in politics, also in the media. I don't know why. Nobody can do this 24/7. I don't know why. I don't know what's in it for either of them. But I do know that the notion that Boris Johnson and many of his key consiglieres and loudest cheerleaders in the British media will be somehow repulsed by his associations with Viktor Orban and Fidesz, the party, are absolutely pie in the sky. I think there's photographic evidence of another former BBC presenter in some sort of award ceremony or party involving some of the nastier elements of that Hungarian political movement. But I could be wrong, and one must be careful. 11:38 is the time. What do you want to do next? Really? No, we can't possibly do that. This is a family radio show. What an outrageous suggestion. I'm drawn, I think, next to the 21st of June and the Indian variant, because I just get a little bit, what's the word I want? Troubled by, I don't like the word Freedom Day, for a start. If we learned anything last year, in fact, should we do that? What do we think of the word Freedom Day? And then we'll look at some of the more serious elements of this conversation. Freedom is not something that should be offered up as a alternative to security, I don't think. I just look back, and there has to come a point, of course there does, where we're just going to have to cut our losses and see what happens, whether or not new variants emerge, whether or not passports are needed, whether or not there's lots of variables. But the lesson I thought of last year in particular, right up to and including Christmas, was the rhetorical horrors of casting a relaxation of restrictions designed to keep us alive, casting it as some sort of victory celebration or freedom. I could be getting this completely wrong, by the way, because it's quite widespread, and I'm looking at one newspaper that Freedom Day hangs in the balance, but power of jabs brings hope. Now, inevitably, given the political leanings of this newspaper, it sort of overlooks the fact that the only reason we're in the balance now is because Boris Johnson failed to put India on the red list when he put Pakistan and Bangladesh on the red list, and the Indian variant packed up its bucket and spade and came over to Britain in aeroplanes. But I just, and for what it's worth, my reading of the situation is a little bit more optimistic than it has been previously. I'm troubled, of course I am, by the increases in the Indian variant, but the numbers are still incredibly low. I've got John's voice from yesterday in my ear again when we use the word only to describe a low death toll. It should never be only, should it? But you can point out it's considerably smaller than last year or last month. The pain of the families affected will be no smaller than the pain of the families affected when the numbers were much higher. I want to make that point repeatedly, because the comparison is pertinent, but I completely grasp how it might reach the ears of the bereaved in a very cynical and even insensitive fashion. I'm very keen to avoid that. But I think the vaccination programme, which continues to be brilliant, thank God for the NHS, will or is still in with a very, very good chance of heading off the Indian variant at the pass. Most of the evidence suggests that policies already introduced surge testing in the relevant areas, and double vaccinations being accelerated for people living in the riskier areas would appear to be working, but there is a chance that they will have to suspend it for a little longer. I think it was Christina Pagel I heard on the radio this morning, who's brilliant on this, and she was giving it what you might call the 100% health argument, and saying that another couple of months in lockdown would just make us more like Israel. So if you're looking for a country that has really nailed it with regard to coronavirus, and I'm not commenting on any other area of recent events in Israel, I'm commenting solely upon vaccinations, lockdowns, and indeed COVID passports, then Israel is an absolute exemplar. And if we wanted to, the population vaccinates already at 62.9%, just north of 10 million people. But if we wanted to emulate their, I nearly said freedom, so I am genuinely asking you whether or not this word is helpful or not. Is there another word we could be using? But if we wanted to emulate Israel's loosening of lockdown, if we wanted to emulate Israel's emergence from lockdown with the same levels of safety that they have managed to ensure, then this expert earlier was suggesting that another month or two would absolutely put the cherry on the icing upon the vaccine-related cake. It would be belt and braces. And I don't think it's insensitive at this point to remind you that for an awful lot of people, they're getting close to a point now where they want neither belt nor braces. They just want to. I don't know that anyone's going to sort of start saying it's ridiculous if they can't start making money soon. How many people would be an acceptable price to pay? How many infections, deaths, so that the dry cleaners can reopen? I think, hopefully, thankfully, we've moved away from those sort of ludicrous contributions to this conversation that were very popular last year. Do you remember when people were talking about we didn't shut the pubs in the Blitz? So why are we shutting them now? And you sit there sometimes and you think, this isn't just ignorance. This is almost like it's almost like a psychological flaw. It's at that point, bizarrely, that I sought not to have pungent opinions on every issue and instead to put my hands up some days and say to you, I don't know. I don't know. And strong opinions built upon ignorance are very, very dangerous in these contexts. So if we wanted to be like Israel, we'd have to possibly keep the lid on for a little longer. The numbers suggest to me that we're probably going to be okay on this, but the 7-day change this week is 20.5%. Last week it was, I can't remember what it was last week, but the numbers have gone from 16,107 to 19,412. So, you know, this is bad, but percentages are a little bit unrepresentative sometimes because the overall numbers matter more than the percentages in the context of cases. So that's why we look at the change. Let's do that. Give me a ring. Is this notion of the 21st of June being Freedom Day helpful or unhelpful? And what I like about this question is, I'm off next week. We may not have spoken for a while, you and me. I've been setting the bar very, very high lately. And on this one, I don't think you really need to be particularly embedded in any position or even that well informed. I think we've all been through what we've been through in the last 18 months. We all saw what happened at Christmas. We all saw what happened on July the 4th, which was offered up, I think, as some sort of Independence Day. We all saw what happened on, I always forget whether it was VE Day or D-Day, but there was a big commemoration and street parties, and Johnson tried to cast that as some sort of triumphant celebration. So it's happened, to the best of my memory, it's happened 3 or 4 times already that this particular government has tried to cast the loosening of lockdown as some sort of celebratory triumph. And every single time so far, they've absolutely muffed it up and killed people. I don't think that's going to happen this time, but I do think that calling it Freedom Day, I'll go there. It's just a bit stupid, isn't it? Give me a call, tell me what you think. And as I say, I just want to know your thoughts on this. I don't need chapter and verse, I don't need receipts, I don't need evidence. Calling it Freedom Day, is that a good thing or a bad thing? 0345 60 60 973 is the number you need. Because I worry that it just puts it as the latest example of unnecessary and previously fatal desperation to make it sound like good news. But I could be wrong. But anyway, Freedom Day. I'm just seeing it in the Telegraph today. Freedom Day hangs in the balance, but power of jabs brings hope, which would be, I guess, understandable if we hadn't had various other date lines that were disastrous because the government treated them like street parties, like celebrations. It would be inhuman to close down over Christmas. I just wonder, is it helpful, unhelpful? Or am I barking up the wrong tree on this occasion? Joseph's in Tunbridge Wells. Joseph, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
First-time caller. A little bit nervous, but I'll give it a go.
You're very welcome. Have you brought your flag?
I haven't got a flag.
What? I'm afraid I can't continue. I cannot continue this conversation. Somebody should have warned you. Carry on. What do you want to say, Joseph?
I do apologise. I shall dash out and buy one immediately.
I'll let you.
I disagree with the term Freedom Day, and in a larger sense, with this constant need by the Conservative Party to have a date set for whatever it may be. I hate to say the B word, but including with Brexit, there was always a constant need of, it's going to happen on this
Frost
date.
has been complaining about that. He essentially said the reason this deal we've signed is so rubbish is because we had to do it by a deadline without mentioning that. Oh, well, anyway, we digress.
Exactly.
Carry on.
But just having a deadline set that then isn't met because variables change, especially with the nature of a pandemic. And due to.
I mean, you're not pinning hope on it. Then I don't want to alienate people who are listening to the radio, thinking, "Oh, come on, James, let us at least, even if the light at the end of the tunnel goes out or goes backwards, it's really good to have a light at the end of the tunnel." No, or not?
I think it's brilliant to have a light at the end of the tunnel, but why set an end date when we knew that it had to meet X, Y, and Z dates first? We knew it had
you have finessed my inquiry, actually, in the style of a much better radio presenter than I am, because if it's data, not dates, how the heck can we have a Freedom Day already chalked up in the calendar?
Already in the diary, yeah, it makes no sense.
Are you sure? Because we could both be wrong about this.
We could be, but as I hasten to say, I'm a musician.
Yes.
The reopening of the world is very important to me because we want to get out and perform to the people, but I don't want to lose it again in any stretch of the imagination. So why not set the first date? When the criteria has been met, we can set the second date, and when that criteria has been met, or if it hasn't been met, we can reevaluate the situation as we go.
And it is odd. I mean, maybe there's an operational reason. I mean, if you're setting up a business, then maybe you would prefer to have a deadline, a date upon which the doors are thrown open, even if it is subsequently moved. I genuinely don't know, which is why I quite like being able to throw open my phone lines on a day like today. So there it is. Joseph leads us towards the more pertinent version of this question. If it's data, not dates, what the hell is Freedom Day all about? 0345 6060 973. I sense it's built partly upon this completely bogus notion that anybody wants to be in lockdown, that anybody would choose this in normal times, that anybody somehow embraces the privations and restrictions of lockdown. I can just about see how, if you were lucky enough to be furloughed, there were some major attractions in essentially being on a fully paid holiday for several weeks, like a sabbatical. I get that. But I really do get that, and I worry on the programme it's a part of the population that we haven't actually touched enough, because, you were laughing while other people were crying. But the idea beyond that, and some people will in the future enjoy working from home a bit more than they did before the pandemic. That's just natural evolution, normal. But this idea of Freedom Day, really? All you do when you announce that Freedom Day is on the 21st of June is... surely all you do is introduce the possibility that it won't be. Ben's in Brighton. Ben, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello.
I just wanted to talk about the actual word itself.
Yes. Do we know where it came from? I don't want to do anyone a disservice. I've seen it in the Daily Telegraph. Have I heard any politicians say it?
I don't know. I haven't. I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but I just
no. But it's out there.
It's a very slippery bit of framing, and it's problematic because it just presents us as currently being unfree, whereas what we actually are is we're living through a pandemic.
Yes.
And so we're taking all the measures necessary to keep ourselves and keep our loved ones safe. And so by naming it as Freedom Day, it creates this frame where currently we're not free. And that feeds into the hands of the people who are presenting lockdown as some
do you know what it is in South Africa?
No.
It's the day that you celebrate the first post-apartheid elections. That's Freedom Day. Here,
there we go.
Here it's the lifting of restrictions put in place belatedly and incompetently, but designed to keep us alive.
Right, yeah. But my point is that, like, we're free now, but we're also doing what we can to keep people from dying.
I'm keen to speak to people who aren't free. I'm keen to speak to people, because I see it on social media a bit, but one tends not to spend too long in those particular corners. But people who talk about freedom all the time, I genuinely don't understand it. I sense you don't either completely.
Well, you see it a lot in gun culture in America, where somehow freedom there is equated with everyone having guns.
Okay.
Whereas actually here, freedom comes in many flavors. And the kind of freedom we have here is we get to walk around in public and not have to worry about where we would hide if someone started shooting. So that's our kind of freedom.
My freedom not to be shot at school, you'd think might be relevant in the context of conversations about gun control. Here's an interesting thing. So here's the Daily Express, Ben. Boris, we may need to wait for our freedom. The I newspaper, I know, the I newspaper, which is altogether more responsible, variant fears threaten end of lockdown on 21st of June. It's the calling it Freedom Day I'm trying to get my head around today.
Right. Well, we're free now. We're just looking after each other, or at least some of us are.
Yes, I mean, whether it does any sort of deep damage, I guess the damage it does depends on whether it happens or not. If they call it Freedom Day and they fluff it up again, and if it is fluffed up, it will be entirely because of the failure to put India on the red list when Pakistan and Bangladesh were put on the red list, then you've just created another problem for yourself. But if I was Boris Johnson, I'd probably say, well, look, we romped home in Hartlepool, and look how many people we killed because of our Christmas confusions and chaos. Listen, folks, honestly, I think we're golden. I don't think anything's going to touch the sides with this electorate. We can do whatever the hell we want. Let's call it Freedom Day. If we have to move it again, we just blame it on, I don't know, the boogie. Ulf is in Hamburg. Ulf, Freedom Day. Do you have a German equivalent?
No, mainly because it's 16 federal states acting on their own within certain limits. So there will not be one individual day on that will be the same for everybody, except when the cinemas open on the 1st of July, but that's not a government decision. I noticed that Freedom Day and VE Day sound a bit similar.
Yes.
Maybe Boris Johnson views himself as the reincarnation of Churchill, which I think is a gross insult to Mr. Churchill, but never mind that. So he's the one who protects the freedom of the United Kingdom and beating Europe at the same time.
Blimey. Yeah, mate, but we didn't beat Europe. Well, I suppose we did. I prefer to see it as liberating Europe, or liberating Europe.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is how embarrassing would it be for Boris Johnson if the UK didn't just open up later, but later than, say, Germany or other EU countries?
I can't see that happening with vaccination rates at their current rate. I could see it being more or less much of a muchness, or just a matter of being a month or two apart. And you're probably right. Okay. So I don't agree with you about the semantics of it, or the sound of freedom being similar to VE Day. I think the freedom line has come from these, I'm going to call them weirdos until someone explains it to me in a way that doesn't leave me thinking that they're weirdos, who keep banging on it. The kind of people who've been marching through London, licking each other and that kind of thing. It's very deeply strange.
We got them too.
I know you've got them too. We've all got them. I blame, I don't know, Facebook. But so I'm not having that, but the idea that it is going to be an opportunity to say, look at us, yay, we're out and about, and the Germans are still confined to quarters.
Yeah, remember, your vaccine program is not called virus beating, it's called world beating. I find that strange. I'd be more interested in beating the virus than in impressing the world.
Do you know, I'll take my pleasures where I can at the moment, Ulf, but that is an observation of quite particular pertinence. That is absolute. I don't want a world-beating virus response or a world-beating vaccine programme. I want a virus-beating vaccine programme. You're onto something. I reject your VE Day comparison in the way that you framed it. But why do we have Freedom Day? Answer, so that we can have, and in fact, I'm just going to check on this and see whether or not we have, I don't believe it. I was just going to check the Sun. Guess what, the Sun, I don't know if it's on the front page of the paper, but the top of the website yesterday, voters are looking ahead to Freedom Day, not back at last year's mistakes. Unbelievable, isn't it? Unbelievable. And that is from a newspaper called the North Korean Sun. I beg your pardon, Rupert Murdoch's Sun. Voters are looking ahead to Freedom Day, not back at last year's mistakes. That's the front page, or at least a major headline in the Sun newspaper on the same day that we spoke to John. Don't look back at last year's mistakes. Don't help people understand why their family members died. Just look ahead to Freedom Day. What does Freedom Day mean? Well, nothing, really, because we're following the data, not the dates, aren't we? Right. It's 12:01.
On your radio. On Globe.
4 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And I am troubled now by the tension between freedom and security. Why are we calling the 21st of June Freedom Day when, touch wood, please God, whatever you appeal to when you're hoping for something to happen, please God we're okay, and we can begin to release these restrictions. But why are we calling it Freedom Day? If we were an unfree nation, then we wouldn't be where we are now. And where does it come from, and how helpful is it? I guess, look, if it happens, if we get a lid on the India variant, and it happens as planned, as scheduled, then we can just chalk this hour from the tape, from the record. It would be pointless and ridiculous. But if it doesn't happen, then what was the point of it? It's data, not dates, they say. But by the way, 21st of June is Freedom Day. Yeah, I'm not going nuts, am I? It's data, not dates. All right, everyone pay attention. It's data, we follow data, we do not follow dates. But also, the 21st of June is Freedom Day. Just explain that to me if you can. That's all right? Chris is in Grays. Chris, what's going on?
Well, I'm listening to this Freedom Day, and I think it's just a misnomer completely, because government's not in control, scientists are not in control. So the only thing that is in control is the virus.
I mean, the point at which we can fully loosen restrictions is the point at which we have got the virus under control, Chris. And I think we're very close to that point.
Well,
to quibble slightly with you.
Well, you could say that. I mean, but the thing is, it's all about testing at the end of the day. Because a lot of people will be going back to work. Are they doing the flow test? Or are they coming in and getting their test done 3 days before they go back to work, which should be happening because they're doing the same for international travellers. Why not do it for people going back to work, especially in places like supermarkets, shops, everything, you know?
It's a good point, actually. So if you call it Freedom Day, you actually encourage people to be less conscientious than they would have been if we could have come up with a better day, like... I don't know, returning day or baby steps day.
Yeah, whatever, you know, but Freedom Day, I mean, freedom's not having a need for the word.
That's nicely put. That's very nicely put. Where do you think it comes from? Is it this Boris Johnson's obsession with giving the country Christmas presents? Well, not Christmas.
It's another soundbite, isn't it? You know,
I think
this looks good, we'll do that. You know,
and that's why I worry slightly when I'm looking around for examples of it. All I've got is the laziest corners of right-wing journalism. Freedom Day hangs in the balance. We may need to wait for our freedom, Boris. And the Sun, inevitably, don't let strain delay June 21st Freedom Day. That's the stupidest thing I've ever read. I exaggerate slightly for comic effect. But the idea, as you've just pointed out, the strain doesn't know what day it is. The India strain's not going to go, all right, lads, pack your bags. It's June the 20th. We've all got to go home tomorrow. We've all got to go. We're out of circulation tomorrow. The strain doesn't go, oh, it's Freedom Day, June the 21st. That's the point you're making, isn't it?
Yep.
That's a very good point. Whatever next. 8 minutes after 12. Tell us why we're wrong. Set Chris straight. Freedom Day is a really important and necessary little bit of politicking, even if there is today a greater chance of us not having quotes, freedom, end quotes, on the 21st of June than there was this time last week. Why? Because they muffed up the India variant. They're too busy. They're so busy coming up with things. Bogus celebrations to do the relatively straightforward business of keeping new variants out or doing more to keep new variants out. Here are the numbers now. You will get through. 0345 6060 973. And if you can, this tension between freedom versus security that the first caller really picked up on, Ben, the second caller in Brighton, where does that come from? Why would they try to sell you the idea that having less protection from this virus is a win? I know there has to be a balance, but why is this a right-wing thing? Why do sensible newspapers simply say variant fears threaten end of lockdown on 21st of June, right? That's not celebratory. It's not possessed of any rhetorical flourish. That's the I newspaper. Turn to the Sun. Don't let strain delay June 21st Freedom Day. Turn to the Telegraph. Freedom Day hangs in the balance, but power of jabs brings hope. Daily Express. Boris, we may need to wait for our freedom. Why are they calling it freedom? Genuine question. I haven't got a clue. Russell's in Bristol. Russell, what's going on?
Hello, James.
Hello.
Yeah, I've just noted down a few alternative slogans.
Right, wait there a second. Russell has brought notes to the programme. That is the kind of commitment and conscientiousness that I'm going to expect when I get back from my half-term holiday. Carry on, Russell.
Okay. Yeah, they love a slogan, don't they?
They do love a slogan.
How about, instead of Freedom Day, we could have Public Irresponsibility Unleashed Day, Encourage Hospitalisation Day, or Hedonism Day.
Hedonism Day. Well, actually, I quite like the last one. I know you're being sarcastic, but I'd probably buy a ticket for Hedonism Day.
Far be it from me to be sarcastic about this lot. Really. But I just see it as kind of just another example of sort of, cheap populism unleashed.
Is it? And that's why, I mean, then you answer my question about why it only seems to be right-wing organs that are doing it. It's cheap, it's lazy, it's more or less fact-free, but they think it will deliver a sugar rush into the minds of their readers, the alleged minds.
Daily Express Field Day. It's just cheap rallying around the flag, cheap populism, and it's kind of... I just find it sinister. I really find it sinister.
I wouldn't have gone that far. Before we started doing this phoning, I wouldn't have gone that far. But Ulf's point about vaccines being virus-beating, not world-beating, has really resonated with me, actually.
I think that was brilliant. And I think what he exemplified was just something that our mainstream media, of course, never, ever, ever concentrates on, and how just so narrowly focused they've encouraged us all to become. We never ever gained a sense of perspective about anything, about what our nearest and dearest neighbours actually think about us.
No, I know. Well, that's, I mean, geography, ideology, insularity, you refer to. And it's not, you say we, most people I know aren't like that, but I fully accept that many, many, many people are. And it's the encouragement by people in power who have enjoyed plurality, who have enjoyed a multiplicity of experiences, who do have interest in foreign cultures and foreign climes, climbing to power on the back of stoking the fears of people who haven't. And it's very, very sad. 12:12 is the time. I like that. The silly notion. Well, look, say it again. I'm possibly missing something here. Why is it called Freedom Day if it's not just a slightly stupid stroke populist tactic designed to make it look like we've got one over on someone else? Nick's in Lambeth. Nick, what do you think?
Hello, James.
Hello.
Your last comment, I think, was spot on, getting something over on someone else.
Do you?
I think it sets up, maybe unconsciously, it sets up a conflict. If you call it freedom, it means that there's some sort of oppressor that you were oppressed by before.
Yes.
America, they have Independence Day. That was when they got rid of the colonial power, which, of course, was us at the time. South Africa, they have their day. I'm not quite sure what it's called, but it's
called Freedom Day, when they celebrate the first post-apartheid elections. Yeah, I looked it up, actually, just in the last half an hour.
They got rid of the apartheid regime. So when you call it Freedom Day, it sets up, maybe subliminally, the sense, there was some sort of oppressor, some sort of wicked person.
And they gave it to her. They freed us. They protected us. They liberated us.
That's
my days.
So, of course, like the populist press and populist speech writers and so on, they've set up, but again, it's slightly dog whistle, they set up some sort of enemy. And the enemy is, who call it what you like, sage, the cautious people, the experts, whoever. But
not the virus, but people, isn't it? Those people who wanted to keep you locked up. Nobody wants to keep you locked up, but you cast them as an enemy. It's like the constant playbook. I can't believe I needed this explaining it to me. We'll protect you from a non-existent enemy, and therefore you'll vote for us.
Right. And, of course, your favourite commentator of all wanted to have Freedom Day when we got Brexit, didn't he?
Oh, did he really? Says it all.
Oh,
don't say his name on this programme. Don't say his name. No, seriously. Otherwise I have to turn around 3 times and recite Our Father into a broken mirror.
Yes.
Freedom Day. Freedom Day. Freedom from what? Freedom from freedom of movement. Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds like something worth celebrating. Freedom from the largest single market on the planet and our biggest trading partners. Freedom. Yes. Yes, it's a very good point. You know, bringing him into it. Almost touch of the pots and kettles going on there. Coming up to 12:15. So I'll read you a couple more comments on this. I think it's darker than that, says Dave. It panders to the muzzle, your rights are being restricted. It's like the Stasi in East Germany, this anti-mask, anti-vax element of the... And you bring Brexit into it as well, Brexit supporting voters that support this. I get out quite a lot, and I haven't picked up on that. In the context of the media... right-wing lazy journalists telling you that their favourite politicians can protect you from things that don't exist. Yeah, all right, that's very Brexity. But among ordinary punters, among ordinary voters, among ordinary members of the public, I don't know that being anti-mask or anti-vaccine is of a piece with being pro-Brexit. I could be wrong. I'm just, putting it out there. And Neil says it's a page out of Boris and Dominic's movie playbook. Johnson as Jeff Goldblum in Independence Day. Let today be our Freedom Day. And then he adds, I paraphrase. Is there something else going on here that we're missing? Why are they calling it Freedom Day? 0345 6060 973. When what it is just hopefully we can loosen things a bit safely day. So you're in the sea, right? My thanks to David for this point. I rather like it. I hope it works. But I've already credited David. In case it doesn't, then I'll blame it all on him. So you're in the sea, right? And you're drowning. Right, be careful. It's just an imaginary exercise. But David Hasselhoff is there. David Hasselhoff and Pamela Anderson, showing my age. Speaking of my age, I'll tell you in a minute. It's a sad death, actually, of someone who was very much a staple of children's television when I was a kid. So if anything like my age, you'll no doubt feel a bit of a frisson of poignancy as I did. So you're drowning in the sea, right? Just off Malibu. But Pamela Anderson and David Hasselhoff are there in peak Baywatch kit and caboodle. And they get their special little mini surfboards and their big hard balloons, or whatever it is they use, and they come paddling out to you, and you're like, oh my God, help, help, help! Then Pamela Anderson and David Hasselhoff arrive, and they get you in the recovery position, and they get you all strapped up, and they pull you, they drag you back to the beach, and they give you, depending on your tastes, either David Hasselhoff or Pamela Anderson will then give you full mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and you come coughing and spluttering back into full animation, at which point you say, yes, I'm free from these pesky lifeguards. That seems to me what we're doing with regard to coronavirus by calling it Freedom Day. We're not freeing ourselves from the virus, we're freeing ourselves from the measures put in place to control the spread of the virus. So you call it Unlockdown Day. I quite like that. Why has it become known? And I can't work out where it started. Perhaps you can, actually. Special prizes to anybody who can find the first use of Freedom Day to describe June the 21st. I hope it hasn't been done by a politician, but they've certainly not discouraged it. Right-wing media reaching for Freedom Day without really admitting that it is, at the very best, it's completely meaningless, and at worst, it's rather sinister, because, as Sebastian points out in this tweet, it's a classic playbook. The machine requires an enemy so that they can save people from it. Immigrants, refugees, EU, or protection from ventilators, protection from viruses. What are they doing? I do not know. Richard's in Cologne. Richard, what would you like to say?
Well, I think, like most of you callers, I think it's just encouraging a day of irresponsibility where the Lords of Misrule will take over.
The Lords of Misrule.
Yeah, and that's what it's encouraging people to go wild and irresponsible. So I'm not in favour of calling it Freedom Day. But on a side note, today was my Freedom Day.
In Germany? What does that mean for you?
For me, it meant today at 10 o'clock I toddled along to a local government offices,
yes,
and I received my German citizenship.
Oh, gosh, that kind of
So my freedom of movement, which was taken away at the beginning of the year by the UK government, has just been restored to me by the German government.
Yeah, well, more fool you, Richard, because I have got freedom of movement between the United Kingdom and Ireland. What have you got?
Yes, I've got it between, Austria, Switzerland. Only Switzerland's not fully, is it?
No, but you've got it. You've got freedom. No, they've got, the treaty allows you to do, well, it should do, although they're having a bit of a wobble at the moment. Belgium, Croatia.
Yeah. And all
France.
the rest of them.
Yeah, but I've got it between UK and Ireland, mate. So, 28 countries, is it? 29 you've got? I've got one! Yes!
Yeah, it's a great feeling, isn't it?
That's Victory Day for Brexit. Well, congratulations. Are you allowed to be a dual national? Do you have both, or have you surrendered your British?
No, the German government was very kind. A little before Christmas, I was just thinking about, I'll have to get along the local offices and do something about sorting out my status here. And the local government preempted me by sending me a letter, effectively inviting me to toddle along there, get some forms filled and everything, because they were encouraging all Germans, all the UK citizens currently resident in Germany to apply for and be given dual citizenship.
Oh gosh, that is nice. And the bureaucracy was quite smooth as well, clearly.
They actually wiped away some of the bureaucracy, because officially in Germany you have to take a language test, or demonstrate your language skills, and take a German citizenship test, which is a sort of general knowledge thing about Germany. But
they waived that because of the urgency of the situation, and presumably the numbers involved as well.
Yeah, they did waive that. And the woman just said, so here's the form that after you prove your language skills, you have to sign this form. Okay, I'll sign here. All right, sign that. Yeah, here's the one about the citizenship test, and you sign that when you've done that. Just sign here. Fine, that'll go off. Fine.
I like. Well, congratulations. Freedom of Movement Day for you in Cologne, but I bet you're feeling stupid, with 28, 29 countries you can move freely between, when if you only had a British passport, you'd be able to go to Ireland for now. 24 minutes after 12 is the time. So why is it called Freedom Day? Ruth in Bristol, here's a necessary word of caution. James, I agree with most of what you say, but today you're being a real pedantic buzzkill. I'd never kill your buzz. intentionally, Ruth. Tell me more. People have been stuck at home for over a year, unable to see family and friends, and that's the best case scenario. If we're on track to lift restrictions and people are looking forward to it as a bit of a milestone, albeit with a cheesy name, why ruin it for them? I'm not ruining it for them. If it gets moved, it's ruined, Ruth. Calling it something else doesn't ruin it for them. Calling it cautiously doesn't ruin it for them. Recognising that the last 4 or 5 times they've given us a big finish line to sprint over, it's ended up making everything worse and killing people almost immediately. So it's not me killing your buzz. Variants can crop up at any time. Corona is here to stay, so if we don't lift the restrictions soon, then when? I'll tell you when, Ruth. When the data says so. That's what the government promised. So you are more than welcome to accuse me of killing your buzz. But the government said it would be data, not dates. And the 21st of June, the last time I checked, is a date, not data. If the data changes, then the date has to change, which means calling it Freedom Day would have been a mistake, and they killed your buzz. Jason's here to spoil the party, Jason in Putney. I should mention, Jason, I read your rather longer message the other day, and it touched me. I forgot to say so at the time. Hoping that's the same Jason in Putney. You haven't even got freedom of movement when the UK, between Britain and Northern Ireland, if you happen to be carrying a bag of soil. I very, very rarely leave home without a bag of soil, but he makes a valid point, actually. Our last caller in Cologne, Richard, can travel with a bag of soil to every country in Europe except this one. We can't even go from Ireland, or rather from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. Lizzie's in Finsbury Park. Freedom Day, Lizzie. What do you reckon?
Hello, James.
Hello.
I think there's something that taps into a sense of entitlement using the choice Freedom Day.
Yes.
Nobody's going to dispute that we're all entitled to our freedoms. We have multiple British and international laws that support that concept. And so by setting it up as Freedom Day, it reinforces the idea that you are entitled on that date. Again, date not data, as you've said.
Yes.
To do what you want. And so if there starts being a discussion about changing the date because of the data, it enables people. Thank you very much.
No, you're very
Australian
welcome. I said it once.
True.
I said it for one show. I said data. I think I've been listening to Jacinda Ardern too much, and I got ribbed for it so mercilessly. I went straight back to data. I thought data sounded a bit cleverer, but sorry, I'm teasing you. I'm taking out my own ribbing on you. Carry on, Lizzie.
Well, and using Jacinda Ardern and what's happened in New Zealand and my own country of birth, Australia, you want to talk about taking away people's freedom, proper 2 weeks of hotel quarantine.
Yeah.
Not what we have here.
No.
What I went through in December, not having fresh air for 14 days with a beautiful big window that didn't open, not having a room key, not being able to choose what time your food is delivered to you. You talk about the restrictions that some of our care homes were put under. The rules are there to help save lives.
It's an astonishing picture you paint, and it tallies slightly with the earlier caller talking about how insular we are. The only way they get away with what they get away with is by completely ignoring what the rest of the world is doing. Even Dominic Cummings alluded to this in his infamous testimony earlier this week. But they've taken away our freedom. Well, tell that to country XYZ, where everything has been much, much more stringent and largely much more successful.
I agree. And you think about the suffering that the people of India are going through right now, and so little of what we hear about it. So what we hear instead is the India variant is going to ruin this for all of us, not the literally hundreds of thousands of people who are dying, people who can't say goodbye to their loved ones, as many of us weren't able to, people who are literally fearful for their lives. And we're looking at it and resenting it because it's going to stop us from being able to have a party with an unlimited number of people.
What is it? What is the freedom? What will you be able to do on the 21st of June that you can't currently? I find it hard to keep track of things. Once the kids are back at school, that's near enough to normality for me to not notice what else I can and can't do. And I've been to the pub quite a bit as well. So what else? What changes on the 21st of June?
The definition of hedonism, based on somebody who spoke earlier.
You're not. That's not an entirely serious answer to my question. I mean, the people who have been prevented from working in various sectors will be able to return to work technically, but will they be able to actually do anyway? Are you going to be queuing up to get married? DJs, photographers. Emma makes this point. The only people on the 21st who will be, quotes, free, end quotes, to do something they currently can't do would be people who've been shafted up to this point, the DJs, the photographers, etc. So they'll still be just as angry if they can't open up. And if they do open up, well, they have to thank Boris for it. We've given you freedom to go back to work. It is a bit of a strange one, this. The more we talk about it, the more we think about it, the more confusing it is. Why have they called it Freedom Day? Because it's supposed to be about dada, not dates. And June the 21st is a date. And every other time they've put a date on it, put a ring on it, every other time they've put a date on it, they've ended up killing some of us. Freedom Day! Don't ask what it is, just celebrate. Never mind the quality, feel the width. I don't know where that comes from, that phrase. I don't know where it popped out of my mouth from either. I should probably have checked. It's just a bit silly, right? I mean, at best, it's meaningless. It's an attempt to be able to cast themselves as deliverers of good tidings, as long as you forget the last 3 or 4 times they've tried to deliver good tidings and it all went horribly and fatally wrong. Or it is an attempt, as many of you are suggesting, to kind of go down that exceptionalism route. Freedom Day. What have they done in Israel? I've got a lot of listeners in Israel. Have they called it anything over there? Is it called Freedom Day in Israel? 12:34 is the time. Colchester next, which is not in Israel. It's in Essex. Will's there. Will, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Nice to finally speak to you.
Likewise.
It's been a while I've listened to your show.
Yes.
Freedom Day. I caught Nick Ferrari talking about it on the... I caught him on the radio this morning on the way in. And,
were you using that phrase?
Sorry?
Using the phrase Freedom Day. I'm never entirely... I always get a little bit nervous when people start talking about colleagues on the programme. Try and confine your comments, if you can, to what you've heard on this programme.
It was more he was referring to the newspapers.
Yes. We can all do that. Freedom Day hangs in the balance. But so, I mean, what's it all about?
Well, it's encouraging people to get out and about, isn't it? Because, well...
But we don't want to encourage people to get out and about if the Indian variant is on the march, which is the worry.
I completely agree. But when you hear people talking about people's livelihoods, businesses, shareholders suffering financially because of the measures that are designed to keep people alive.
Yes.
But, it's, like I said, it's about getting people out and about.
Regardless of risk. I mean, this is the problem, isn't it? Call it Unlockdown Day, and I'm just as likely to go out for a small sherry as I am if you call it Freedom Day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And since the restrictions have been lifting, I mean, we went to a theme park on the 17th when they started to relax them, and while they had signs up saying, be socially responsible and all that kind of thing, it wasn't happening. There was too many people there. And, I mean, I don't know if you've got anything nice going on for your little holidays, but we tried to go away this weekend to somewhere, we couldn't find anywhere.
Don't rub it in. I'm supposed to be in Greece. Will.
Oh,
fourth time
I haven't been on a foreign holiday.
Fourth time we've postponed it. This time last year, I was supposed to be in flipping New York City. City. Let me read this. Tell me if you agree with it. Dave's in County Durham. James, it's a narrative created by the same right-wing liars who peddled a similar narrative about getting back to the office to save your sandwich shop. It's not an actual thing, just fatuous rhetoric, which recent history has showed has already caused the deaths of thousands of people.
Yeah, well, it's the same. I was working in a cafe at the time when they brought out the Eat Out to Help Out.
Yes.
And, I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was sitting there thinking, is this actually happening? And it did take quite a while for things to get really bad, like sort of around Christmas time. But I was sitting there thinking for a while, for a good couple of weeks, well, nothing seems to be happening. Maybe we can relax. And then, look what happened at Christmas.
No, well, I agree. And for the record, I still don't think that necessarily the data will deliver a death knell for June the 21st, or back to normal day, or whatever you want to call it. But why turn it into a celebration? I worry about that. And the more we talk about it, the more I worry about it. Because I think, and I shall say this only once, I think that it is evidence that they're just going to do what... Eventually it's going to work. It's like the opposite of that old, probably apocryphal adage about Albert Einstein. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again in the hope of getting different results. Now, in a laboratory, that's true. But it's not true in this context, because you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, and eventually it will work, does change according to vaccination. So the virus-beating vaccine, as opposed to the world-beating vaccine, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. So we've got world-beating test and trace systems as well. Do you remember? World-beating. So I think that whether you're looking at July the 4th, whether you're looking at Christmas, whether you're looking at VJ Day, I think it was last year, whatever one it is you're looking at, they treated it like a Freedom Day and they killed tens of thousands of people. In the words of the Prime Minister's closest advisor at the time, avoidably, unnecessarily. They killed thousands of us unnecessarily with these stupid, gimmicky, slogan-led pronouncements. But if the virus-beating vaccine is rolled out on a sufficient enough scale, eventually they'll be able to have their flipping party and it won't kill thousands of us. All they ask, and then we go back to the Sun, which, I kid you not, yesterday carried the headline, "Voters don't care about last year, they only care about Freedom Day." So forget about the fact that the last 4 parties these people invited you to left many guests dead and you crippled on the floor with food poisoning. Just make sure you get your invitation for the next one. And that's my best case scenario. Charlie's in Oxford. Charlie, what would you like to say?
Hello.
Hello, Charlie. What's on your mind?
Yeah, first-time caller.
Welcome,
not very
welcome.
well, so also a bit nervous. Now,
What's wrong? Is there anything I can help with? Do you know what I mean?
No, it's a bit like long COVID, but
I'm
over
sorry.
35 years.
Oh, dear. I'm sorry to hear that.
No
Well,
problems.
I shall be very calm.
This lovely Freedom Day, the right-wing press, they are just making sure that we get Christmas coming round twice in the same year. If we find that our politicians basically are persuaded not to do what the data says and give us a few days or even a few weeks of grace. I've just been picking up on the fact in the British Medical Journal, they're saying that our surge testing, our use of lateral flow tests, are not fit for purpose.
Oh, really?
That they don't actually detect the infection in people who are symptomless to start with, but are carrying the infection.
I hadn't seen that.
And that surely is at the moment a mainstay of this government's attempts to persuade us that they're doing surge testing and surge vaccination.
Well, I got a message. I've been invited for a surge test, actually, so I'm going to go this afternoon,
Okay.
but I'll also keep a close eye on what you report.
Well, this is alleged, but...
I'll have a look at it. I mean, I'll go and better safe than sorry.
We may have spent £1 billion on a surge testing setup that just doesn't work.
A drop in the ocean. We spent 37 billion quid on a test and trace system that's not fit for purpose. Sorry, world-beating test and trace system. So
let's hope the data is being determined on a reliable basis.
Well, I mean, to defend the Daily Telegraph, which is not a position that comes comfortably to me, the headline Freedom Day hangs in the balance is accompanied by what I believe the technical term, Charlie, is an absolute shed load of data. There's graphs here, there's percentages, there's pictures, there's numbers. Unfortunately, there's also a photograph of some young women in a crowd at a music festival sitting on their boyfriend's shoulders and waving their arms in the air, which undermines I mean, it almost makes the point perfectly, doesn't it? Here's some data, but here's some people having a party. Which side do you want to be on? Jamie Vardy's side? That's not fair on Jamie Vardy. I don't know what his views are on lockdown, but he is famously often to be found having a party. Do you want to be with the party? Do you want to be a party pooper, Charlie? Or do you want to be a party animal?
Well, I was looking forward to the possibility in June of there being a few parties.
Well, I agree with you. I would like to be a party animal, but not if attending the party is going to pose a mortal threat to me and mine. And that seems to be the problem that we have happened upon. What a sparkling debut, Charlie. Many thanks indeed. In the spirit of reading out texts that don't make any sense to me, in the hope that they might make some sense to you, I'll read this one out. Oh no, you and your little mates taking about Freedom Day, you must mean talking about Freedom Day. Who is interested? As a general rule, people who get in touch with the programme. But I guess that doesn't work in your case. Who is interested? The rest of us do real jobs called work. E.g., I work in education. Oh my God, really? Hope you feel you add value to people. I do my bit. Linda's in Crawley. Linda, what is going on?
Hello.
Hello, Linda.
When they set this so-called Freedom Day,
yes,
they weren't taking the Indian variant into account.
I think you're right, aren't you? Can we remember when it was first mooted? I mean, it was a while ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the reason I phoned is because I would, rather than put the day off,
yeah,
because I've got a son who's 29 years old, who's been asthmatic since birth, and he hasn't been vaccinated. And there are so many people that are out there saying, oh, no, we should get back to normal and we should do this. But the chances are they've had their vaccinations. My son hasn't.
Have you phoned 119?
We phoned the doctors, but they're still doing it by an age group.
Give 119 a ring after this. It may not work, but it's not going to do you any harm. I've had good reports from other listeners to the 119 thing. And
you know, it's not that far off now, to be honest with you, because in our area they're doing 30 and over.
Yeah, but still, you never know. You might get to jump the queue.
I think it's a selfish point of view. You know, I've had 2 jabs.
Yes.
But it's all very well saying, well, you know, I've had my jabs, so, you know, now let's get back to normal. But I don't want to have come this far.
No, I know. I understand exactly what you're saying, and I understand why you bring your son into it as well, for the most obvious of reasons and the most responsible of reasons. But weirdly, I don't think Freedom Day is aimed at people who've been double jabbed. I think Freedom Day is aimed at people in their 20s and 30s, so half of whom won't have been jabbed at all, and some of whom might have had one.
I worked in a care home up until last November.
Oh, gosh.
And we brought somebody in from a hospital that had COVID.
Yes.
And it spread through the home. We lost 18 residents. And I had to go in every day. And my fear was not for myself, but what I was going to take home to my son.
Oh, boy.
And that's what I've lived with since this outbreak. There are vulnerable people out there. And it's not just about me and my son. And however many people say they want to get back to normal, well, we'd all like to get back to normal, but I would rather have my son here than get back to normal. I'd rather not live in fear every day that, you know, if and when he does go out, which isn't very often, he's not going to, you know, contract this disease.
We need to get him vaccinated as soon as possible, and then you can relax. But what you're saying to everybody else is please don't relax until as many of us as possible are safe, including my boy.
Well, the other thing I read was, and it may or may not be true, is the virus seems to be targeting younger people. But in my own head, I think, well, of course it is, because I don't know that it's
exactly. No, I think you're right to have questioned your own conclusions on that. I don't think that it is targeting younger people. I think that unvaccinated people are obviously more likely to present with it, which is actually good news, even if it doesn't sound like good news. And I'm obviously not talking about asthmatics in their 20s, but it means that if you get it and you've been vaccinated, which is a possibility, you won't die. So younger people getting it, highly unlikely to be hospitalised, which has always been the case. Older people getting it, hospitalised, but also vaccinated, therefore least likely, considerably less likely to die. I don't know that the word targeted works in that sentence, but hey, I'm a gob on a stick, Linda, so, you know, don't take my word for it. That's just my informed, I hope, semi-informed burbling.